This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello world, and welcome to episode 245 of a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I have Alex Murrey, and he is the head of North American operations of TangoTeams, which is a startup that works in software development and outsourcing, kind of redefining that whole industry. And we'll talk a good bit about that as well, because we are a Geek Leader, so we talk a lot about technology and software development when it comes to leadership roles. Alex, welcome to the show.
John, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are in your career and what that process has been like, and what you guys are doing today.
Sure, love it. So I've spent my entire professional career in the services space. Early on, did a lot of work in sort of operations and software development inside of the law firm world of all places. Spent a good chunk of my career building software that we use as kind of a unique value proposition to like the clients that we'd work with, right? These big organizations, big banks. Left that industry, spent the next number of years doing software consulting, very similar to the work I've done today, or I'm doing today. Then it's been a really unique opportunity to see kind of the inner workings of a lot of organizations. And in doing that over the last 7 years, what we've seen is that there's been a real, there's a gap in the market, right? There's a way that software services are done and a way that organizations buy these services. And there's a big middle ground for the way they might actually want to be consumed. I was fortunate enough to partner up with a couple of other individuals and create TangoTeams, basically providing a subscription-based service for software development or software developers to address that gap in the market and hopefully give people a better product, a more valuable product that is quickly growing and continuing to reimagine what this outsourcing industry looks like.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because we are, I manage a team of people, and hiring people has been like crazy as of late, just because I don't know what it is. I've talked to a lot of people, and I hear different things. I hear people are unhappy with their jobs. They're looking for other work. I hear people are shifting careers because of newfound enlightenment from COVID. I've heard people don't want to go back to their office because of remote work. And I hear things like people weren't happy with the way their companies handled diversity and inclusion, and now they're leaving. There's all these factors that probably all of them play a percentage of what we're seeing going on now. But how has that impacted outsourcing of software development? Because that's always, outsourcing of software development has always been a thing. I can think back to like my first time managing a web and mobile development team. We used outsourced developers for pieces and bits of our project, but I imagine that that's a different thing now.
Yeah, it's it's totally changed over the last couple of years. And I think, COVID, like you mentioned, has only accelerated it. What we've seen is that, and I sort of mentioned this gap in the market, what we've seen traditionally is there was sort of two ways that outsourcing was done, right? Number one is you've got your local team, and then you're like, hey, like you mentioned, John, hey, we've got to like outsource some part of this, maybe for some expertise or capacity to go faster. And we sort of like throw it over a wall to somebody, right? Hey, like go get this thing done. Let me know when it's done. And like, maybe I'll check in once or twice. And
here are your requirements. Go.
Yeah. Yeah. Which usually, I think you and I both know that one is pretty challenging.
Yeah.
And didn't really live up to the promise in a lot of ways that it
never
thought it would. Right. And the other is you outsource a couple of developers. Like you go get a few people to maybe join your team. Mm-hmm. What happens in that case is now you've got this crazy like time zone difference. Maybe they're in India, maybe they're the Philippines or somewhere further. And you've got this 11.5-hour difference where you're trying to communicate with this promise, quote unquote, that you're all part of the same team, but you never had the tools and technology and sort of standards to really build that thing, right? So the people that you were outsourcing to had a question. The next day in the morning, you got to it. The next night, they finally got back to it. So 3 days later, you've got a resolution to your question and you've lost a bunch of time in the process.
Yep.
And what we've seen in creating TangoTeams, we've built a globally distributed company that's largely based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, with a few key folks here in the States as well. What we've seen is that actually recreating that model to say, hey, how do we still provide guidance and leadership? How do we provide real transparency in the work that we're doing and give autonomy to the teams that are doing work, but also provide our clients with a team that is just an extension of their team, right? In a lot of ways, a coaching around what does it mean to actually have a distributed engineering team? What does it mean? What are some of the ways that we can work together? What are some of the tools and technologies that we can use to really build a more cohesive unit in a way that makes it feel like this external service that I'm paying for is actually teaching me something about how to run my org, and we're finding ways to be efficient in that process. So from what early on in some ways was a lot of clients or customers that we would approach or talk to would say, hey, I really want to focus on, building my internal team or building up the folks that we have here. That conversation has shifted just over the last 8 months or 6 months to say, hey, what we're really focused on is actually, we want to focus on how do we build leaders who can learn and understand and implement a new model for work, right? A new way of working in a distributed environment where not all of the people are in your office, or not all the people maybe share the same values you do because they're part of different companies, but we can align and guide companies forward in a way that used to be, hey, I'm in the office so I can go tap you on the shoulder and ask you a question. But now, hey, let's build some transparency in our working environment and some expectations that allow us to align on where we're headed.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good, because there are skills that they're hard. And I think it came to light more with COVID when people got forced to be remote when they're not used to it, right? And some of those things were like, you had to almost plan for communication a lot better than you do. Like like you say, I can just walk next door and talk to someone, right? Or I'm going to go grab a cup of coffee, and while I'm going, I'm going to stop by and we'll have a conversation that was unplanned. But then I realized, like, after a month of being at home, I never talked to this person, because
Right.
didn't make it intentional to do that. And I had to learn to say, okay, we've got to be intentional about these conversations. Otherwise, it'll never happen. Because that serendipitous, bumping into someone in the hallway stopped happening. Have you seen that, like, this model of kind of retraining the leaders to lead a new way of doing offshore, or I guess you'd call it outsourced development, has been beneficial while they're managing their local teams as well?
Yeah, what it's helped a lot of the companies that we work with do is kind of rethink that model, right? You talked about, like, oh, I used to pass the guy going to, get a drink of water every day, and I don't get to talk to him anymore. And when COVID first started, one of the things that every company went to was they just turned every in-person meeting into a Zoom meeting, right?
Yep.
And all of a sudden, like, and we heard about it for the first year of COVID, that Zoom fatigue is real. Like, more of our time is being spent in meetings that could be half as long, but they're not.
Or could be an email.
Yeah, exactly. One email. And while there's, a ton of value in, like, we're sitting here today looking at each other across a call, there's a ton of value in making that connection. There's a lot of times where it's not the most important part of that interaction, right? What our employees want to get out of it is, hey, there's some things I need to do. I'd like to understand the sort of strategic vision and direction of the company, or why decisions are being made, or, give me some context for that client. Well, it's great to be able to do it in real person. Sometimes even having a close time zone, right? Argentina is 1 hour off the East Coast, so they're 1 hour ahead of the folks in the East Coast of the US. It's still much more effective in a lot of cases to use things like Loom is a good example that we'll use for strategic communication around, hey, I can record a quick video. I can give you the context and the intonation and my excitement maybe about something that's happening inside the organization, without doing it in real time, right? Without going, hey, we're aligned for 4 or 5 hours a day. Which of those hours could we maybe do this in? Well, I could probably do it in a 5-minute video, and I can still get you that personal touch. I can still put my flavor, my opinion, my excitement, my whatever stress, right? Even in some cases about a situation into that interaction, allow you to consume it when you need to consume it. And we'll continue to stay aligned on the topic, right? Or come back to me with questions. Hey, you said this, but I think you meant it this way. Was this the right thing? Are we doing this for this customer or not? all of that you can gather from a interaction, a quote unquote face-to-face interaction that oftentimes you can't gather in writing. And especially for companies that don't have a deep writing culture, which most didn't prior to COVID, is a really hard thing to do, right? So a lot of context is lost in that process. And coaching our folks, coaching people to go, hey, there's a different way to do this that can still keep us connected, has been a really important part of our organization.
So one of the things that I remember when I was managing remote teams, our outsource and offshore teams and things like that, it was almost like we had that scenario you mentioned, you kind of briefly talked about at the beginning, where we had the opportunity to meet between like 8 a.m. Eastern time to 9 a.m. Eastern time. But then after that, they're gone for the day and you have to wait till the next day to come back. And time zone was an issue. But also there was this idea that we never saw the people face to face. We never saw their face. We never didn't humanize them. You know, it was almost like it's just a voice on the other side. And sometimes when you're not humanizing someone, you're not seeing them as a person, you're seeing them just as a resource. And I hate that term. I hate the HR term, just human resource, because it sounds so gross. But anyway, when you're just seeing them as a resource to use instead of as a person that you can work with and that also has ideas, you're saying just do this like I tell you to. You're not getting that benefit of the person coming up with creative ideas and coming back. Have this coaching that you're doing where you're changing people's mindset of, recording short videos or more face-to-face where you're seeing the person that's working with you as a person and not just as a resource, has that changed the quality of the work coming back? And if so, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it has for a couple of reasons. Maybe I don't want to touch on something that you mentioned. So I think early on you said, hey, I used to, pass Bob in the hallway and Bob and I would catch up and I'd, kind of see how he was doing, how his kids are doing, whatever. And now I don't. Right. And one of the things that we did when we built this company, and we still do today, and we're not very old. We started this company in April of this year and have grown pretty quickly to almost 70 folks now, probably 100 by the end of the year. So it's certainly a challenge for us as well. But as in key meetings, we have a Monday morning stand-up meeting with kind of our local team here, another meeting later in the week with a broader part of our leadership team. And we spend time in those meetings. We know that they could be done in 10 minutes. That meeting there's 4 of us in the Monday morning meeting, or 5 of us. We make that a half-hour meeting, and the first 10 or 15 minutes are a question on a topic has nothing to do with our business whatsoever. Last week, it was your favorite Halloween memory, for example.
So it's like a little icebreaker to get everybody going.
Yeah, it's an icebreaker, but frankly, I've learned more about. I know that one of our key guys, Alberto, loves gin and tonics. He's incredible at creating Halloween costumes. Him and his son built an awesome costume this last year, which is super cool. I know sort of what sports he likes to do. He's getting into biking now. He's doing all these things. And it takes an investment from our side, right? It takes that investment. And hey, we've got to go slow in some cases to connect, to understand each other. And now that we have some shared values, some shared structure, he's the family guy, he cares about biking. He wants to take care of his wife and his kids. His daughter's traveling. Like, great. Now we can connect on things. Now we can have a conversation about how the work should be done, when we should get these things done. What are the priorities to you and I? And once we've built that sort of shared component, now we can have real conversations about the value of the organization, right? Hey, I know what Alex values. Alex knows what Alberto values. How do I go have a meaningful conversation about what he expects from me, what I expect from him, what I expect from our other leaders and folks in the organization, to have discussions that sometimes are animated, right? Sometimes are challenging. And if you don't have that shared trust early, it can be a very difficult conversation to have, or often comes off, especially when you're remote, you leave the conversation, hit end. Well, now I'm sitting back in my office alone again. And all I did was feel like I've disappointed somebody in my organization, right? If we don't have that connection internally, or all I've done is feel like I had an animated conversation that didn't get to an outcome, whatever the case may be. But sharing on those values early is really important in terms of the ways that we can build trust. And for teams that are remote to know that, hey, we are in this together. We are building a shared vision for what the future looks like. Now, while it's been important to our employees and to our leadership team to build that level of trust, it's become a significant way that we can build trust with our customers, right? To start to share some of those same practices, to start to share early on, largely before we'll even get into an engagement with the customer, to share the ways that we work, to share, often get in like a Miro session, digital whiteboard tool, and solve a problem together early. Because just like, building Legos with your kids, for instance, like solving something, building something together creates this moment of impact, creates this moment of like, hey, now we're doing it. And when we get to the finish line, it feels so much better because we kind of struggled through it together. And those, those little things that you used to do in a real whiteboard, you'd go put stickies up and you draw the thing over here and you'd put arrows to it, weren't happening early. And it was creating a friction point that didn't need to be there. And finding ways to share digital experience, even though it's got to be digital, has really created this sort of trust and momentum as we move forward as an organization.
So when you guys are operating and working with your developers, like I almost feel like, well, I guess I'm just curious of how it works. Yeah. Is it more like whenever I would outsource developers, they wouldn't report to me per se. They would report to someone remotely, and then I would get feedback from that person. We go back and forth. It was almost like there was an extra chain, extra thing in there that didn't need to be there, in order to make that communication. And it was all clunky. Have you guys changed that model at all? And how does that look today?
Yeah, I love that question, John. You're exactly right. There's always an extra person in the way, right? So you didn't have that almost tangible connection to the team you're working with because there was someone on your side, someone on their side, and it was like playing a game of telephone. Never went very well. What we've done in that situation is sort of change that model to say, one, from a lot of years of doing this, I know that having a project manager that actually sits locally with the team, that can be the face of the team to our client at key interactions and key points and in day-to-day work is super important, right? Putting that person in the US or having somebody here that talks to customers, but they're not the person that's doing the work, things start to get lost in translation. And with that little bit of time zone difference, it just takes that much longer to get to a resolution, right? Where if we can put a project manager directly with our teams, and with in air quotes, they're all in Buenos Aires together, maybe not in the same office right now, but with the team in a local time zone, often, when they're working on hard problems, although English is very good for most of our folks, it's easier to solve problems in your native language. You can go quicker. You can really, get to the core of a problem faster. We'll put that project manager and the team all in the same quote unquote location together, allowing them to really work through problems on their own, and then empower that project manager to say, hey, you're really the face of this team to our customer. We want you to work directly. So while, myself or others may be there for support if you need it, our goal is to not be, right? To let them work directly with the team. And that same bonding we talked about internally early is the bonding that team needs to have shared across those borders as well.
I think that's good because it always felt like before, like there was this, extra relay that had to happen. And, heaven forbid someone be on vacation. And it's like, oh my gosh, why can't I just talk to the guy?
Right. Right. It was always, that you've seen, I'm sure, that video of like the BA drawing the picture on someone's back, and then they're supposed to draw on the person's back in front of them. It's a project manager, and they're supposed to draw on the back of the developer. And it starts as like a smiley face and ends up as just a terrible squiggled snowman or something, like not even close. Right. It just seems like that's reality for a lot of situations.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And, it's good to hear that things like that are changing and evolving as we're, progressing. And I love the fact that you guys are putting people together and working together in the same kind of environment versus, trying to, I don't know, go back and forth. Cause I always felt like before it was like everybody on the offshore team was trying to sell us on their ability when we had already purchased it. We'd already agreed upon it. And, we wanted them to tell us, no, this is not the right way of doing that. You need to go this route. That we wanted that pushback whenever we had a stupid idea. Because sometimes we have stupid ideas, especially me in management. Yeah. The higher up you go, the stupider your ideas get. Yeah. Right. And, I wanted someone that had the ability to push back and say, yeah, I hear what you're doing here, but, JavaScript's not the right language for this one. Let's try some C# or something. But we wouldn't get that. We'd say, yeah, we can do that. And the next thing you know, you spend $20,000 and you get nothing because it was the wrong solution. And no one had the courage to speak up and say, nah, this is not the right idea. Let me help you out and give you a better way of doing that. So it's good to hear that that's kind of in the process of changing. What do leaders need to do to make themselves more adept to accepting the feedback whenever they're managing offshore teams?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge, right? Just not being in that scene, like you said, to do it. And how do you manage these teams effectively while also giving them or empowering them enough to make decisions, but ultimately you're responsible for the output at the end of the day, right? As that leader or manager in the software development space, especially. for those groups, I think what's really important and what we've seen make a big difference is building buy-in early and taking those software development teams along for that journey, right? Often there's a lot of discussion about what should be built, how it's going to be built, what's going to happen. And then they go, all right, poof, and they drop it on your plate and go, great, now go build this thing. And there's no context for it, right? There's not a lot of context for what's going to happen. And by bringing that team in earlier, you actually allow them context, allow them a bit more decision-making ability or authority in that process. And for folks that are, then challenged by, hey, maybe there is some pushback, maybe the software development team wants to go in a different direction, how do I sort of differentiate the recommendation from my thoughts on how it should have been done as a manager or a leader? What's the most important things that I can do to find the middle ground to make that decision? I think it really relies on growing the sort of empathy muscle, right? How do I understand where this decision came from? Asking some really good questions about it, and removing the outcome from the process, right? So, hey, how did you get here? How can you help me understand where this decision came from? Great, because that, the other manager, Bob, really has a tendency to go JavaScript instead of TypeScript, then that's a good point. I forgot about that. Yes, let's go JavaScript in this scenario. It's not just, hey, JavaScript would be better, because as a leader, then you go, you kind of have this reaction to like, what do you mean? My idea was a good idea. So it's like, okay, as now that you understand this journey, where we came from, I can ask some good questions. I can be empathetic to the situation, and I can understand where it came from, and then use that as a feedback tool to then guide a team forward.
Yeah. So you mentioned the fact that you guys use, a random question or like an icebreaker or something at the beginning of your internal team meetings. Is that something that you guys have thought about using on the outside as well? So that, because you mentioned building that empathy muscle, and I struggle with the empathy, and especially like if the further they are away from me, the less empathetic I am to them. The further, the more different the culture is, the harder it is to be empathetic to, cultural backgrounds and things like that. And it's hard sometimes. Have you guys thought about using that on the outside as well, so people can help, I guess, humanize their team a little bit and grow that empathy muscle?
Yeah, it's maybe less systemic, because each customer that we work with has their own sort of nuance and flavor and how we're going to work together, true. Right? But where we might not dictate all the same ideas that we can internally. But one of the things we've done is try to find ways to align with our customers, to kind of highlight their people, their folks, and their abilities that aren't work related. Right? I'll give you a good example, maybe two examples. One is we've got a customer that we work with, that one of the guys on the team, his nickname, they even puts it in his signature line, is Jukebox. Right. And so I talked to him one day, said, you've got to let me know where Jukebox come from. What happened here? And it turns out he's like the musical historian, right? If there's a song, he knows who wrote it. He knows who sang it. He probably knows all the words to it. And he's just always been that guy. Well, great. Let's incorporate that in. So we've got Tune Tuesdays, right? Every one of our Tuesday meetings, he comes with like one song that he wants to share or highlight something about the music industry that always ends up in a good discussion. And we've got another version, same customer, actually, a different set of stakeholders. We've got Bad Joke Friday. That's over, we use Microsoft Teams internally, but over Teams, people were able to post you're full of them, I'm full of them too, bad dad jokes.
Oh yeah,
right, about what they are. But it always gets a good laugh on a Friday morning, and inevitably the next time we get into a conversation, it's, hey, Sasha, love that joke. Where'd you find it? Like, whatever. It starts a conversation that is not, hey, what's the agenda? What's the meeting item? How are we doing? And it gives people who, in many cases, maybe a little bit more introverted, but they want to know about people, a chance to share a laugh together, and a way for us to build that inherent camaraderie across sort of our customer lines.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And, speaking about dad jokes, there's a guy on LinkedIn and Twitter that he's actually been on the show once before, David Neal. I think his Twitter handle is Reverend Geek. And he always posts like a dad joke every day that he draws. And they're corny as can be, but me and my daughter just like crack up laughing at them. I think they're so funny.
Yeah, it's just a good way, man, to like kind of break the tension, to start on a different note. And we're going to go solve some hard problems together. And I'm sure we're going to have conflict because you have different ideas than I have, but we've got a shared baseline. We've got somewhere to start.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I think having that, like you said, that baseline, that shared thing at the beginning is really important, and it's important to do that early on, to do things together early on to kind of build that teamwork, because it's much harder to do later. If you didn't do it at the beginning, you're going to struggle, and then it's hard to come back and try to say, oh, let's build some teamwork now.
Yeah,
exactly. It feels awkward, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's really good. What are some things that you've seen with teams that have been successful, kind of distributing their workload for digital product and building products? And what are some things that you've seen people do that are not so successful?
Yeah, maybe they're largely one and the same, right? We'll talk about
probably.
sort of two sides of the same coin here. One of the things that we've seen be really successful, and I think that any team, whether you're outsourcing software services or you're just going to go build something internally, or you're going to modify maybe some existing applications that you've got, is having a conversation at the beginning about what it is we're setting out to accomplish, some of the baselines, right? Maybe you've all worked together in the same team for the last 10 years. Hey, what are the tools, technologies we're going to go use? What are the processes we want to follow? Do we agree that on these ways of working for this thing? Right. And agreeing on those early, while it seems in some situations you're like, well, of course we're going to have a stand up every day, or like, of course we're going to, log all our bugs in Jira and they're going to be this way at this time. While it seems so obvious, that again, shared sort of mentality, that shared understanding of what we're going to go do and agreeing on, hey, do you agree that we're going to do this? Yes, I agree too. Let's go do it together. Like you were talking about with trying to build camaraderie after the fact, that shared alignment, that shared vision as you go out to do something. Maybe it's just a 2-week project, taking the 15 minutes to go, great, here's the ways that we're going to work through this. It's going to be in this way. I'll report back every night by this time. It'll happen, on these occasions. Excellent. We've got alignment. I know how we're going to work together successfully. And if I don't hear from, Caitlin by Friday on the thing, I know something's probably gone wrong. Right. For instance. So that's the successful version, and the unsuccessful version is not. And we've had both cases internally as we do most of our work for clients, all of our work for external customers, having those versions where you go, yeah, but we're a startup. We've just got to go fast. We've got to get there faster. It inevitably comes back to, okay, we need to go back and have that conversation, right? We skipped it early on. Oh, we missed a step. I know what happened here. And by creating that again, early in the process, it's paid dividends to us downstream, especially when we look at how we're going to approach a problem with the customer. That early alignment, early agreement pays dividends pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's something leaders should do with all teams that they manage, whether they be internal or external or whatever. I know with my group, we have this thing we call our code, our IT code, our team code, that we're going to do. And they're basic, simple stuff that if everybody thought about it for a second, like, yeah, of course we do that, like you're saying. But the fact that we put it in writing, we talk about it on a regular basis, we amend it if things are changing or we find something we need to add. But they're very simple stuff, like we have each other's back. We're going to choose people over process. Really simple stuff. Question assumptions. Those kind of things that just they provide guidance, and they also put everybody kind of on that same page that you're talking about. That yes, we all understand this, we all get this, we're all together in this, and we know how to do this going forward. And I think that's really important to make sure everybody's included with stuff like that. Have you ever seen cases where like the offshore team, let's say if they're working together with internal, are excluded sometimes, and what can we do as leaders to make sure that doesn't happen?
Oh yeah, this is good. Okay. So yes, I certainly have. I think we've talked on it a little bit, but like where this team, you feel like you've just got this team that's supposed to just go do a task, and you throw it over the wall at them. Hey, here's the requirements. Here's what I need done. Like report back when it's finished. Mm-hmm. It's just so hard to make that work, right? They don't understand that context. They don't understand the journey you've been on. Why are these decisions being made? What happened in the past that got us to where we are today? Where's the context for helping me make this? That tribal knowledge, right? That internal employees you gain over time. You understand that John likes to work in this way. I know he always, he likes to write code in the middle of the night. So he'll get it done. I know it's 10 p.m., but it's not even close to John's, time yet. Those things become sort of part of the norm. And for leaders who are challenged by, hey, how do we not build that, right? How do we build a culture that includes this team into that process, that includes them in that journey? it's really about, I think it comes down to a couple of things. One is over communicating, especially in the world that we live in today, right? I learned at an agency that I spent a good chunk of time at before starting TangoTeams. In part of their onboarding process, they went through, and I wish I could remember the name of this triangle, but it talked about the ways that you learn, right? There was like visual learners, there was hands-on learners, and I think auditory, right? The ways that you actually learn things, and learning that it takes more than one of those ways. Like no one is sort of uniquely in one place in that triangle or on that spectrum, but rather somewhere kind of in the middle. And it usually takes more than one way to actually get something to connect for an individual. So, even though you just met on the thing, follow up in writing on that thing, make sure you've got someone that actually agrees to it. Or, hey, I know, talking about shared understanding earlier, I know that John's a very hands-on learner. A lot of software developers are, right? Because they're good at writing code.
Yep.
Give them a simple version of it, let them go try and come back and ask questions. That question is going to be the sort of auditory experience. How are we going to talk this out together? But try it first. So understanding how people operate and work brings them into that process earlier, allows you as a leader to understand, hey, what is the best way for John to understand this problem? And in the same way, what is the best way for this team that I'm managing halfway across the country, maybe, or halfway across the globe, in some situations, what's the best way for them to grab this information? We've learned, okay, these the folks that we work with are English is a second language by default, right? They're from Argentina. Let's make sure we've got a couple ways. We'll record the video. We'll also make sure that we caption it after the fact. We'll get them, the information that they may need to make that happen. And then over communicate it. Try more than one way. Bring it back to what is important to you as a leader, inside of ageekleader.com, the organization. John's got to, run a business. Here's what's important to me. Here's the values for what I'm trying to create. This is why these decisions are being made. Again, that journey is so important to where you're headed and the leadership style that you carry with it.
Yeah, for sure. Why do you guys pick Argentina?
Yeah, I love it. So when I started this company, or was asked to join a group of guys to start the company, I'd actually spent quite a few years before that working for a company that was originally based out of Buenos Aires that broke its way into the US and is now, Fortune 500 public company today. The private equity group, for lack of a better term, that helped us start this company, one of the owners of that group or partners in that group is from Argentina. Came here when he was 14, built a career for himself, life for himself here, has been here ever since, and really wanted to find a way to give back to that community, to that world, and to grow something that could, that people could be a part of in Argentina. He saw his family come here and come from almost nothing and build something for themselves and do it. And he wanted to go, hey, how do I give back there? Not only that, but when we look at it, Argentina, specifically Buenos Aires and kind of the area surrounding Buenos Aires, is a massive hotbed for talent. There's been a lot of investment in really good schooling, really good code schools, universities, et cetera, that's created this population of amazing software developers that are, again, closely time zone aligned. You're not in India, you're not in the Philippines or somewhere else. Similar, although very different, similar cultures in some key ways that were shared values for us. And we just felt there was really, really great opportunity to approach a globally distributed market. We built this company in COVID. We knew that the model for work was changing. It was an opportunity for us to sort of capture that market at the right point in time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you had a chance to visit Argentina and go there and enjoy the weather?
It's coming. As you know, the borders were closed for a lot of places for quite a long time. It's getting into like spring and summer right now, right? It's the opposite climate as us. So the plan is to get down there very soon. The borders just opened in the last week or two, and I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if you spent much time in like Argentine culture. I've been fortunate enough, like I said, to work for an Argentine company that came to the US, and a lot of the folks that came to the US with it, incredible asado, incredible wine. And you'll be in the mix of barbecue and wine for a number of hours. So, for all intents and purposes, that's my, that's my wheelhouse. I'm looking forward to getting down there.
Yeah. I can get used to that for sure. Yeah, so I would imagine that would be something I would try to put on my calendar, like at least every few months. There just to check in and enjoy it, and
That's
enjoy
exactly right.
what that's like. Yeah, so for sure.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, and we built a company with folks that I've not met in
Yeah,
person. The leaders in Argentina. We've built this experience over Zoom and Teams and whatever else. And as you can imagine, or as you know, starting an early company, there's plenty of hard conversations to be had about the right direction for the company. I think for the most part, we've been very successful in having them out in some cases over a call, because we trust each other, because we've built that up over a long enough period of time now. But man, I can't wait to go, give those guys a hug and share a glass of wine together and make it all worth it.
Yeah, I hear you. Absolutely. So how can people find out more about you and about TangoTeams? Oh, and also, where did the name TangoTeams come from?
Yeah. So kind of a fun story. Number one, when we looked at this company, we knew that the model for a lot of these software development services were broken. So we reinvented that industry in this subscription-based model, right? You can like go buy a team for a period of time that is high performance software development, the super transparent. We put the pricing like right on our website, right in our documentation. People can go find it. Like you mentioned, it's at TangoTeams.com. But in doing that, we were trying to find the right name, and we knew it was this team model that were really high performance. And it just immediately clicked for one of our guys that, hey, the national dance of Argentina is the tango. It's tight rhythms. It's got to be aligned. It's got to be high performance. Like when you see people compete like globally doing the tango, it's super impressive to watch, and it is on point. And that word and that name and the tie to Argentina was just the perfect balance for us. So therein lies TangoTeams. Awesome. But yeah, like I mentioned, John, the best information that you can find out about us today is at TangoTeams.com. You just search for online. It's all one word. And then any of the information that's in there, we can be found, just through the contact form there. A lot of those come directly through to mine and one of my partners' inbox. So we're always up for a good conversation. But yeah, we share as much as anybody online, and hope people check it out.
Awesome. And I'll link that up in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can find it there as well. And Alex, man, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
John, thank you. I enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.